an impossible love in the military school. When my father saw me kissing in my bed with that boy whose name I can't even remember, well, his face turned red and I swear he had tears in his eyes. Angry tears, of course. He's never shown any emotion in his life besides anger and excitement. He named me Pablo, after him and his father, because he always thought I'd become the man of the family. I was his first and only son, and his expectations on me and my manhood were always very high. So when he found out he'd never see me married to a woman, I stopped being a son to him. I had just turned 17 that night, and I had never kissed anyone. So I felt behind and wanted to get it over with. I wasn't necessarily expecting to find the love of my life, but just to find out what it felt like. I always knew my first kiss wouldn't be with a girl. I loved them, but never saw them in that way. So I just linked with the only other gay guy I knew in my class and went blunt with him when we were at lunch. "Hey Steve," I think that was his name. "Do you wanna come over to my house tonight? I'm alone and we could have some fun." He was just a chill, all-around dude and didn't think twice. Not because he liked me, but because it was just another irrelevant night in his life with a boy he didn't care about, but would possibly give him a good time. When he arrived, I didn't have anything planned, so I told him to come up to my room and watch Netflix, or just listen to some music. As soon as he arrived, I immediately turned the TV on because we didn't actually know each other that well, and the ambiance was tense. None of us was able to start a conversation, and both of us knew that that wasn't the plan. We laid down on the bed, and in an uncomfortable move, Steve put his arm around my neck, and after 15 minutes of some cheesy movie, I was impatient and kissed him out of nowhere. I didn't have time to lose. It would just be another night. Turns out, it wasn't. In just a fragment of a second, I saw flashes of my whole life pass through my eyes, while I heard my room's door open violently and my dad screaming like a caveman. I stood up as fast as I could, and Steve, regretting the moment he agreed to come over, started running past my dad and down the stairs, fleeing a situation I, sadly, could not escape. My mom came running after she heard all the noise and tried to calm my father down, but it was all useless because in the middle of my mom crying, he told me how disappointed he was and how I had turned out. "Well, this is the son you have, and there's nothing you can do to change that," I told him in tears. "Maybe there is," he replied with a sudden calmness that scared me more than his screams. "Go downstairs, Martha. I'll handle this situation on my own," he told my mom, who obeyed him just to calm him down. It was unfortunately the worst thing that could have happened. When my mom left, my dad immediately called one of his teenage years friends and chatted a few minutes with him while I was listening, terrified. He told his friend that his son needed correction, and the best way to do it was sending him to the same military school he went to when he was young. Amongst a lot of other details about tuition and the time I would get there, I didn't pay attention to because I was thinking about the life that I'd have to leave behind, and how much I would hate my dad for doing this to me. "This is for your own good, Pablo. I didn't raise a child to be a sinner. You're leaving tomorrow. Pack your things, and when you come back, I hope to see a man." I didn't respond to that because I knew I would never speak to him again. As soon as I arrived at the school, I knew it wouldn't be a place I'd want to stay in for very long. Generally, I've never got along with boys. I don't know how to talk to them, and when I have, they've just made fun of me. I don't think I've ever met a guy who was kind to me, and to my bad luck, I was in a place where there were only men around me. On the first day of classes, the teachers introduced us to the campus and explained to us how life would look for the next 2 years we'd be there. We all would have to wake up at 5 a.m. and go to bed at 9 p.m. We'd have to do chores on the weekends, and in the afternoons, play some sport. I've always been bad at sports. It had been a very long day, and I just wanted to get to my room, wherever it was, cry a little, and go to sleep. Luckily, at 5 p.m., they put us on a line, military style, and started to send us off to our rooms. To my surprise, and adding to the already bad day, I found out I wouldn't even have a room to myself, but share it with another dude. This was basically the thing I feared the most, so I started to look at all the boys in detail, trying to identify any threat and just hope for the best. Almost all of them looked the same, butch white guys with frown-up faces and bad attitudes. Some had tattoos, some looked very traditional, but overall, almost all of them looked like they would break me in a fight for the bathroom. Except one guy who stood out from the crowd like a ray of sun. He was the only one who didn't look miserable by being there. And why would he? He was tall, masculine, you could see his muscles through his very tight shirt, and how he was just really charismatic all around. He was made to thrive there. The boys around him were as fascinated by his presence as me. Or, well, maybe it was a little different kind of fascination. They finally told me which was my room, and without hesitation, I ran to it, trying to at least pick the bed I liked the best. I picked the bottom litter and waited patiently for my roommate, hoping he at least wouldn't be a bully. Someone knocked the door, and I stood trying to put on my most masculine posture. Maybe if he sees me as another dude, he'll leave me alone, I thought to myself as I opened the door. It was him! It was the Sunshine Boy, the boy with the golden hair and perfect smile. How could I be so lucky? Or, wait, so unfortunate? What if he notices I have a crush on him and starts to hate me? Get your shit together, Pablo, be a man, I thought to myself in the fraction of a second it took him to enter the room. So, you've already claimed the bottom, I see, he said with the same charm I'd noticed in the line. I can get my stuff on the top if you want, I said, trying to get on his good side. It's alright, dude, I like the top one best, he said with a voice just as sexy and charming as him. We just need to figure out how we're gonna use the bathroom, and I think we won't have any problems. We can do that tomorrow, I'm really tired now, I answered him, trying to avoid the subject. The way he phrased it annoyed me a little bit. Any problems? Why would we have any problems? It's okay, I guess. My name's Tom, by the way, he replied, putting his stuff on his bed, getting a book out of his bag and laying to read. Mine's Pablo. Nice to meet you, I said, still annoyed, but trying to be kind. After a few days, I started to notice how weird Tom was. He would never actually speak to me besides small talk, good morning and good night, and whatever was strictly necessary. I could still notice his charm around other boys. He was becoming very popular in the school, and not only the students, but the teachers loved him, because he'd already won a lot of football matches, which was the sport he chose. But still, every night when he came to our room, he would just open a book and pretend I wasn't there. He just doesn't care about me, was my first thought the first 2 weeks, and I had already made peace with that fact. But one day, I was playing football because, well, the teachers forced me to do it, and I lost an important point and made the whole team lose the match. The boys in the school already hated me, but after that, things became violent, and one of them took me by the neck and put me against the wall. This school isn't made for little fairies like you, he screamed at me while 5 other boys were cheering him on. Well then, you should leave, I replied, knowing well it would cost me a few punches, but happy to at least make fun of him in front of all the other boys, who laughed at him. Now you're gonna learn, he said, red with rage. Just when he was raising his fist to get back at me for his humiliation, a force came out of nowhere and put him in the ground. As astonished as I was, the bully tried to stand up, but he got a kick in the stomach before he could do it. Try teaching me now, the boy who saved me said with a deep and intimidating voice. It was Tom. He defended me and cared about me. At that moment, without thinking, afraid but full of joy because Tom risked himself for me, I grabbed his shirt and started running with him towards our room. When we got there, he immediately went to the bathroom, and a few minutes later, he came back shirtless with just a towel around his waist. His body was incredibly sexy. He was really white but had tiny moles around his chest and belly, and his abs were pretty defined for a boy that wasn't skinny. There were some minor bruises in his cheek and his ribs. Do you know what I can put in here? It doesn't hurt that much, but I don't want a scar, he asked like a defenseless kid. Oh my god, Tom, what happened to you? I asked worriedly because I thought he'd easily put that bully down. Nothing, that dude's friend tried to stop me, but they're worse, don't worry, he replied calmly. I'm sorry, Tom. Thank you for saving me. Come, let me look for a cream my mom used to put on my bruises. He waited while I looked in the drawer, and when I found it, I motioned him over with my head. While I was sitting in my bed, he was standing in front of me and between my legs. I took little chunks of the cream and applied them in his skin, as slowly and softly as I could, trying to enjoy a moment I knew wouldn't repeat, and in just a brief moment I looked up and noticed him looking down. We exchanged glances, and I swear I saw him smiling before I redirected my eyes to where they belonged. I thought that after all of this, Tom would change, but he stayed the same, only talked to me for small talk. He still had little acts of kindness that showed me I wasn't just another dude in the school. Like one time I fell asleep without a blanket and he woke up in the middle of the night to cover me. Or another where I came late for lunch and there were no seats left, but he had saved one for me. But these acts just confused me even more. I fantasized about him every day before I went to sleep because he gave me little clues that led me to believe he might have been into me, but never actually acted upon it. So seeing him in his perfect body out of the shower, and his beautiful smile in class, and his luscious hair at the field every day was starting to feel more and more like torture. If he would only tell me what was happening inside his mind. I was studying for an exam when the call that would change my life forever came. The director told me through the megaphone to go to his office, and I was very scared, not only because I hadn't done anything wrong, and going to the principal's office is usually what that means, but because it was late at night, and the principal should have been in his room resting. When I came there, I was nervous and sweating. I knocked on the door, hoping no one would answer and that it was just a mistake, but it didn't happen. The principal told me to go into his office and shut the door. His face was expressionless. He didn't seem angry, but didn't seem happy either. If I had to guess, I would have said it kind of looked sad. "Hi, Pablo, how are you?" he asked in a warm tone, almost unrecognizable in him. "I'm fine, sir. Did you need me for anything?" I said, scared because it was all just very odd. Did I do something wrong? I didn't, just for the record. I had to make sure he wouldn't incriminate me for anything. No, Pablo, it's all fine. God, I don't know how to say this." "Say what?" I asked immediately, in disbelief of seeing the principal in such a vulnerable state. "I guess there really isn't a good way of saying this," he sighed, and dropped the bomb. "Your mom called a minute ago, Pablo. She couldn't tell you because she's in a lot of distress, but your dad..." "My dad what?" I screamed in desperation. "Your dad died in a tragic car crash. It was really sudden and there's nothing they could have done. I'm really sorry for your loss, Pablo." Upon hearing this, I stayed there, completely blank. Not a tear streamed down my face and almost didn't blink for a whole minute. "You can take the week or the month off if you want. We understand and are here for you. You can reach me if you need anything," the principal mumbled, knowing well I wasn't paying attention. "Thank you, principal. I'll think about it. Thanks for telling me. Can I leave now?" I said coldly and calmly. "Yeah, of course. Remember, we're here for you." It was already 9 p.m. when I left the principal's office and went to my room. I knew Tom was sleeping because he always went to bed at 8:30 p.m., so he could be awake and moving at 4 a.m. And that was one of the reasons I wanted to get out of the office as soon as I could. I needed space to think and cry. At that moment, I wasn't feeling anything. It's like I was numb and there was a cloud around my thoughts and feelings. I entered the room and went straight into my bed. And that's where it all sunk in. The fact that I'd never, ever see my dad again, and maybe get a chance to reconcile with him. Show him that I could grow and be the son he always wanted. Or maybe get him to understand that this is the way I was. I don't know, just get another chance to see him alive was enough for me. I knew Tom would hear, so I tried to drown my sorrows, and for a while, I thought it was working. But suddenly, I felt how the litter moved and saw him behind my back, worried and scared. "Pablo, is everything okay?" he asked sweetly. "Yeah, I'm fine. Go back to sleep. I won't wake you anymore." I didn't want to ruin his night. "No, I heard you cry. It's okay. You can tell me. I want you to." He was so kind, and I needed his shoulder to cry on, so much so that I almost ran into his arms and hugged him. "Are you sure? I really don't want to bother you," I contained myself. He would only know if he really wanted to. "I'm sure, I swear." "My dad just died in a car accident," I said bluntly, almost coldly. He stayed in silence for a second. "You can just go back to sleep now if you want, Tom. I really don't need anyone right now." It was a huge lie, but I also didn't know how else to react. "I'm really sorry, Tom." He hugged suddenly while he said it. I felt his huge arms around my body, and it felt like home, like I was safe for a while. "I won't leave you alone tonight. You can't be alone." At that moment, I started to cry like I'd never done before, and we stayed hugging for a while in silence. "How was your father, Pablo?" He broke the silence. "Did he have your eyes? Your nose?" "He had my name, at least. I had his, rather," I said with a drowned smile. "Oh, I see. You were his pride then." He looked me sweetly in the eyes. "Little Pablo Jr." "Well," a tear streamed down my face. "Not exactly. His last words were, 'When you come home, I hope to see a man,' before he sent me off to this hell." "Pablo," he grabbed my chin, "you are a man. You're the best man this whole school has. In fact, you're the best man this whole state, country, world has." He started raising his voice. "I hope you know that, and if you don't, I'm telling you. Believe me." He let go of me and went to the door. "You know what? I'm not just gonna tell you. I'm gonna tell the whole school because they also should know." He opened the door, and in a moment of insanity, he started screaming, "Everybody, wake up! Wake up!" I couldn't comprehend what was happening and stood there, frozen for a few seconds that felt like hours. "Pablo is the greatest man that has ever lived. He's kind, he's smart, he's funny, he's beautiful." Just as he was about to scream that, I came back to reality and pulled him into my room with all my strength. "What did you just do?" I said, nervously laughing. "Are you crazy?" "Nothing," he said with his usual coolness. "I just wanted you to see yourself the way I see you." I blushed in a way only a 5-year-old giving a kiss would. He made me feel like the most special person on earth, and I sat down to process what was happening. "Do you really think that about me?" I asked as he lied by my side. "Why had you never told me anything? I thought you didn't even like me." "I do really like you, Pablo," he replied with a soft voice, almost like a whisper. "I'm just not as brave as you. I don't know how to talk to you, how to approach you. I guess I like you too much for your own good." I lied with him and just looked into his eyes. I didn't want to ruin that moment by pressuring him into saying anything he wasn't ready to. I just stayed there, breathing his breath and feeling his own feelings. After a while, he suddenly changed subject and started to ask me about my childhood. "I don't really know anything about you, and I want to know it all, little Pablo Jr.," he said before the longest and most fulfilling chat I've had with anyone in my life started. We stayed all night talking about everything, from our passions to our dreams and fears. I felt more connected with him than with myself. When the sun was starting to rise, Tom and I were laying in front of each other. We'd been in silence for a while, just exchanging glances, when suddenly and out of nowhere, Tom kissed me and hugged me until it was time to go to the classes. A few weeks after that night with Tom, I was still grieving, but pain was every time more manageable because a new joy had been born in my life. My relationship with Tom grew strong, and every night with him felt like home. In the day and in school, our relationship was pretty much the same because he wasn't ready to come out, and I completely understood that, even though everyone already knew I was gay. But when the day ended and we both went to the room, it was a new chance to know each other again. Every night after 9 p.m., the halls of the school were completely silent. It was like a cemetery. The teachers gave a round through all the rooms to make sure all of us were asleep every night. And a few weeks ago, we would have been asleep. But since Tom and I were together, every minute of every second counted, so we pretended to be asleep, and when we were sure the teachers were gone, we became careless. The world just didn't exist outside the walls of our room. Tom, unlike me, had already made a lot of friends in the school. Some were close, and some were just pals he hung out with. But one of his closest friends was Joe, a dude I never really liked. Not only because his personality was akin to make trouble, and that was one of the reasons he got sent off to this place, but because I'd always noticed his love for Tom was a little different from the love that friends usually have. He made me jealous. I never actually noticed any different treatment from Tom towards him, but I still felt like I was competing against a dude that was cooler, taller, and with much more in common with Tom than I ever would. So I kept an eye on him, from a distance of course, and in that quest, I found something that I didn't want to know, but eventually would be my salvation. Joe enjoyed escaping from the school in the middle of the night and going to a bar that was close to a town. All the students knew that, but also wondered where he got the money to do it. Alcohol is expensive, and no one had really any cash inside the school because we didn't actually need it. That's when it all made sense. He didn't earn that money anywhere. He stole it. In the school, it was pretty normal that valuable things were stolen, so we had to be really careful. That was a fact that everyone seemed pretty okay with, until one day it happened to the principal, who had lost a watch that was not only very expensive, but extremely valuable to him. The school went mad, and the personnel started to look for it everywhere, but never actually found it, and were still looking for it. Who else could it be? Of course it was Joe, the only person in the whole school who had any cash, and would be able to do something like that. One night, Joe wanted to go to the bar, but he knew this time it wouldn't be so easy to sneak out, since the security in the school had become stronger after what he had done. The first thought that came to his mind was his best friend. If he tried it with Tom, it wouldn't be so hard. At least, he'd actually have the balls to do it. So he took advantage of the fact that his room was in the same building that ours was, and escaped, avoiding the halls where the teachers were sleeping, and being very silent until he came to our door. His first instinct was to knock, but he thought if there was a chance it wasn't locked, and he didn't have to make any noise, he had to take it. So in a sudden, unfortunate move, he opened the door and found something that would change his night completely. There we were, Tom and I, having sex like almost every night since we got together. Careless and a little stupid, thinking no one would ever come into our room that late at night, without knocking. The first one that noticed was Tom, who was facing the door, and immediately put me aside to grab a blanket and cover himself. Then, it was me. I was terrified. My first thought was, how could I be so stupid to forget to lock the door? I insulted myself a few times, and the second it took Joe to close the door, and look at us like we were some kind of freaks, doing something he'd done a million times already. "Dude, that's gross," said Joe with a disgusted face, and a camaraderie tone that caught us completely off guard. "You know the whole school's gonna find out about this, don't you?" Tom heard it, but wasn't able to say a word. He was completely zoned out, in a way I'd never seen him before. "No hard feelings, though. I still love you. But it's just to keep the honor of the school intact." That phrase just completely pissed me off, and in that moment, I realized he wasn't in any position to make threats. "I know what you did," I said with a cold and calm voice. "I wouldn't threaten anyone if I were you." "What are you talking about?" he replied, scared, but intimidating as per usual. "You know, don't act like you haven't been stealing this whole time. We both know that you have the principal's watch." "Listen, you little shit," he screamed after me and grabbed me by the neck. I was actually kind of getting used to it in that school. "Don't you dare say these words again out of this room if you want to stay alive." "I won't." I knew a promise wouldn't be enough for him to leave us alone. I had to make sure he would never out Tom just because he was afraid we'd say something. "In fact, I'll tell the principal I did it if you forget what you saw tonight. You've never been in this room." His face lit up and immediately let me go. "I like that idea. It's a deal. See you tomorrow in the principal's office. I'll tell him I saw the watch in your room so I can make sure you told him." "It's okay, now leave us alone." The very obedient Joe instantly left with a winning aura around him, and Tom and I just stayed there, naked and looking at each other for a while, trying to figure out what had just happened. "Pablo, what did you just do?" Tom said, waking up from his shock. "What I had to do. I couldn't allow him to ruin your life. Everyone knows who I am, but you're still not ready, and you don't have to be." I grabbed his face and kissed him in the forehead. "Now sleep. Tomorrow will be my last day in the school, and I want you all for myself." The next morning, I was ready and willing to leave the school. I was just starting to like it too, and even sometimes felt more comfortable there than my own home. But it all just seemed like a small sacrifice for Tom's well-being. I knew he would have done it for me. All these thoughts were running through my head while I was in the principal's office with Joe. "Is there something I can help you with?" he asked, annoyed and uninterested in our presence. "Yes, sir, there's something Pablo has to tell you," Joe answered, quick and with the best and sweetest disposition he'd ever talked in his entire life. Seeing how intrigued the principal was just made me even more scared. "Yeah," I said, barely letting the word out and pausing for a second to breathe. When I was just about to confess the crime I didn't commit, we all heard the doors opening violently, and as we turned our heads, saw a boy agitated and sweaty from running. It was Tom. What was he doing here? Was he crazy? "Wait, principal, don't listen to him," Tom screamed like a madman. "He's being blackmailed by Joe. He stole your watch and got it under his mattress. He was planning to sell it and buy alcohol like he's been doing all these nights." "What?" said Joe, scared. "You can't believe this dude. He's just trying to protect Pablo because we're in a relationship, sir," Tom interrupted him. "And that's why Pablo was gonna tell you he did it. Joe blackmailed us, but I don't care anymore. All I care about is that I love Pablo, and I won't let him take the blame for something he didn't do just to protect me. You can kick me out if you want, sir, but please, let him stay. He's the best kid you'll ever have in this school." After Tom said all of this, there was a moment of silence in the whole room, like everything there was to say in the world had already been said, and the words had just run out. "Why would I kick Pablo or you out?" The principal interrupted the silence. "Love is beautiful. I've lived it myself, in a pretty similar way to you two," he said in a way that made us feel like we weren't alone in that situation. "So as long as you treat each other well, you'll always be welcome in this school. As for you, Joe, if I find that what they're saying is true, and something tells me that it is, you'll not have a good time, young boy." After that day, Joe was kicked out of school, and Tom found the courage to tell everybody at school about our relationship. At first, everyone was freaked out and surprised, but eventually they realized it was still the same charismatic, empathetic, and fun Tom, and even included me in it. I was, in a way, part of Tom's family, so they had to respect me and even love me. After 2 years, we both graduated, and I came back to my mom, who was more than happy to see me with Tom. She loved him and begged my forgiveness for letting my dad send me away to that school. Of course I did. If it wasn't for that, I would have never found the love of my life, my sunshine boy. The end. Would you fall in love with your classmate? Thanks for watching. Consider subscribing to become a part of our Rainbow Force, and stay wholesome.